Everything changed after October 7th. History changed. Jewish people have changed. Jewish identity changed. And certainly the days in which we commemorate Jewish identity, commemorate Jewish history, either the days of joy, when we celebrate milestone events of Jewish history, or the day of mourning, sadness, and sorrow, in which we lament and suffer the misery of Jewish history. Those days have to change as well. Tisha B'Av 2024 is a very different Tisha B'Av than past Tisha B'Avs. In the past, it may have felt challenging for some to mourn over a Beis Hamikdash they never lived with, over Jewish sovereignty which had eluded us for 2,000 years. And for that reason, many people redirected Tisha B'Av into days of tshuva, days of unity, of nationhood, gatherings and kumzitz. But real mourning is crying, wailing, absorbing the trauma, internalizing the loss, not responding to it or recovering to it or imagining how you can improve to avoid. It's just absorbing sadness, crying, tears. How can we cry this year on Tisha B'Av for October 7th, but also for the last 2,000 years? Because I fear that this year, the trauma and the tragedy of October 7th is going to overshadow. So it's easy for us to sit down and remember the last 10 months and the hostages and the soldiers and the wounded and all the hardships and sadness and all the sleepless nights and all the frustration and all the tears. But then we have ignored 2,000 years, to Batei Mikdash, the Kinos, the Crusades. So in many ways, Tisha B'Av is easier this year. We mourn because there's immediate, compelling issues to mourn over. But how do we make sure that it's integrated with the Kinos and the sadness of our past? So I think a lot of that lies in the word with which Yirmiyahu's Kinos begins. Echa Yeshva Badad. It's not just Yirmiyahu's selection. Moshe employs the word Echa in a more joyous setting. Echa Salavadi. Yeshaya had used the word Echa when he saw the moral degeneracy of Yerushalayim. Echa Salazona. Why does Yirmiyahu choose this word, aside from the obvious, because he's evoking Moshe and Yirmiyahu and Yeshaya, invoking Moshe and Yeshaya? Truth is, Yirmiyahu is not just invoking Moshe and Yeshaya, he's invoking HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In Gan Eden, after the Chet of Adam and Chava, HaKadosh Baruch Hu inquires as to the whereabouts of Adam and Chava. They're now hiding in the bushes after the shame and the guilt. And Hashem doesn't really have to ask where they are. He knows where they are. It's more of an existential question. It's a haunting question. Where are you now that you have failed so dramatically? Now that the one mitzvah I gave you couldn't adhere to, where are you? Ayeka, Aleph Yud Chav Hei. Where are you now? What will your life be like without me, without the Gan Eden, without... How could you? It's a way of asking how, and what were you thinking, and what will life be? It's an existential, rhetorical question, not where are you, because I can't find you. And that's how Adam and Chava's banishment from Gan Eden begins, with the word Ayeka, Aleph Yud Chav Hei. Yirmiyahu wants to recall the expulsion from Gan Eden. Yirmiyahu wants to liken the eviction from Yerushalayim to the expulsion from Gan Eden. So therefore he reiterates the Ayeka for all sorts of reasons. He doesn't say Ayeka, he's not talking to people, he's talking to history, he's writing a book, so he articulates it not as Ayeka, but as Echa. But his Echa is meant to recall the Ayeka of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The truth is, Yirmiyahu wants to recall Gan Eden and the banishment from Gan Eden, not just by selecting the word Echa, which is similar to Ayeka, but with another word. He likens or compares the destruction of Yerushalayim to the trampling or the stripping of a garden. Vayachmos kagan suko. Hashem took his shelter and he trampled it, or he stripped it like a garden would be stripped of its vegetation, of its produce, of its growth. Vayachmos, strange word. Why is Yirmiyahu comparing the destruction of Yerushalayim to the devastation of a garden? Again, Chazal sense the echoes of Gan Eden. What is Yirmiyahu's message by invoking? What does the expulsion of Adam and Chava from Gan Eden have to do with our departure from Yerushalayim? And the answer is, as much as Tisha B'Av was a national tragedy, and national trauma. We lost the Mikdash, sovereignty, monarchy, land, people. It was also a universal tragedy. When the Jews live in Yerushalayim and the Mikdash is in operation, the world is aligned. It's a better world, more spiritually alive, greater presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, greater potential, greater prosperity, because Hashem's brachas are channeled through the Jewish people and through Yerushalayim. The day that we left Yerushalayim, the lights went out on humanity. All the potential that we had to regain Gan Eden, because after all, Adam and Chava were banished, but then Hashem chose us, and He delivered His Torah. We built a monarchy, we built a people. We were within stone's throw. We were close to re-achieving the perfect state of man and sharing that with all of humanity. And we forfeited it. We broke humanity. We broke history. And therefore, our departure from Yerushalayim is not just the Jews leaving Yerushalayim. It's that, but it's more. It's similar to Adam HaRishon and Chava leaving Gan Eden. Humanity once again sinks into malfunction, into rupture, into a broken, immoral, lost, and confused world. We left through Eicha in the same way that Adam and Chava left through Ayaka. We left Yerushalayim the same way that they left the garden. That's why Yirmiyah sees it as a garden. Right after we left, more or less after we left, it's hard to actually pin it, humanity sinks into a 1,000-year period of darkness, backwardness, regression, stagnation, little progress culturally, scientifically. That's called the Dark Ages now. You can date the Dark Ages till 1000, you can date the Dark Ages to 1400, but essentially, history does a U-turn. It was progressing, it was moving forward, and it reverts and it regresses because Yerushalayim is destroyed. All that potential has been lost. So when we think about anti-Semitism and the tragedy of Jewish history and tragedy of Gullus, we broke history. We're responsible for this broken world. We're responsible for anti-Semitism and hatred towards our people. Now, when I say we're responsible for anti-Semitism, it doesn't mean we should blame ourselves. We see the moral hypocrisy of blaming victims for violence. We were violently attacked on October 7th, and yet the world tries to blame us for it. That's absurd, and it's morally repugnant. We don't blame ourselves, but we created a condition in this world in which we incite the anger of people who then take decisions to perform acts of violence. We're not responsible for acts of violence, God forbid, but responsible for creating a broken world, an inferior world. And the world is starting to change. Over the last 400 or 500 years, science and progress and democracy and capitalism, as the world is veering closer to Jewish redemption, the Dark Ages have subsided, the Renaissance, the age of science, the age of progress, the age of enlightenment. But October 7th reminded us that as close as we are, and as impressive as the progress has been over the last 500-600 years, there's still ugliness. There's still hatred. There's still anti-Semitism. With everything that democracy has promised man and has given man, we're seeing the bastard child of democracy. It's called intersectionality. It's called subjective truth. It's called throwing words around that are hollowed of any meaning and accusing the Jewish people of all sorts of crimes that bear no resemblance to reality. We're seeing the futility of trying to create a just society without Hashem at the core. As much as democracy has improved humanity's capacity to create equality and justice, any society without the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and moral spirit will crumble and will disintegrate into moral confusion, to hatred, into polarization, into bigotry, or just moral confusion, identity confusion. So on Tisha B'Av, we cry because we broke the world. And we broke history. And humanity remained broken for 1,000 years. And now, when we thought and we hope and we believe humanity is improving, so that redemption can come not just to the Jewish people, but to all of mankind who deserve redemption, we're seeing that it's still broken. And October 7th taught us that lesson. As much progress as has been made, as much advance, development, the confusion, the hatred, the bloodlust, the sadism, the brutality, it's still there. And again, we don't exempt people from crimes, but we also realize that it could have been different. If we had remained in Israel with Jewish sovereignty, with the Beis HaMikdash, we would have inspired the world, as we have over the last 2,000 years, to monotheism, to moral behavior, but we would have inspired them from our homeland, not as guests in foreign land, with all the tensions that come when you host a foreign implant in your people who are bright and literate and economically sound, and all the causes and the seeds of hatred would have been avoided. So we cry the first word that Yirmiyah writes, Echa, we think Ayeka. This is the fall of man, round 2. The first fall of man happened when we were banished from Gan Eden. The second fall of man happened when we left Yerushalayim. We realized that when we left Yerushalayim, the garden was wrecked. History is recovering. We're still not there. We will. We'll redeem our people. We'll return to our land. We will repair ruptured history. But we're still living under the influence of a broken world, ruptured the day we left Yerushalayim, the day the lights went out on humanity. We should, Emir Hashem, see the conversion of Tisha B'Av to a Chag. Ribono Shel Olam, Ozos Yom Tov. We lost Simchas Torah. That became a day of tragedy and suffering. All of our Chagim since then have been tainted with suffering and sadness for so many people. HaKadosh Baruch Hu at some point has to pay us back. He'll decide when and how to pay us back. Hopefully this year on Tisha B'Av. Tzom HaChamishi, the fast of the 5th month, Yeh Lechem Beis Yehuda, L'Sason, U'Lesimcha.